Here we go. I do believe we are live. Welcome everybody to another episode of Break the Rules. Left Polyakov at Left Po coming at you. Giant Giovanni Panicietti in the house, and we are here talking with the amazing Jonathan Pageau, Icon Carver, the host of this Symbolic World, one of my favorite podcasts of all time. I think that you and, of course, Jordan Peterson and people from within the sphere are doing incredibly important work today, squaring the circle, so to speak, of all the various things that are going on in our world. So I am absolutely grateful to have you as a guest today. And also, everybody who is watching this, don't forget to subscribe. Subscribe right now. You know you want to. You know you need to. You need to subscribe to break the rules. Anyway, we are going to get started with the first question, which is, Jonathan, you were mentioning that you were not always Orthodox Christian and were not always interested in creating these beautiful icons. And you also mentioned that Christianity was something you saw as different before you started getting into it. Can you please talk a little bit about that? What was this different Christianity that you saw before versus the Christianity you see today?
Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me. It's hopefully this is going to be a lot of fun. So,
Pleasure's
what's the
all
difference?
mine. All ours.
Yeah, and Gio, I've been following you. I guess I've been following you for years on Twitter. I kind of see your
Yeah.
stuff go by and your art and everything. So, I grew up. I guess I grew up in a strange situation, which is that I was a French Canadian who grew up in an evangelical world. So already that's a bit
My
odd.
God, that's terribly strange. Like,
Yeah.
oh man.
So it was a little odd, but it was fine. Like, I mean, there was a genuine love of Christianity. My father was a very authentic person, is still a very authentic person. And my family we're really kind of prone to authenticity and this desire to find the truth no matter what. And so I grew up in that sphere, but when I came into my 20s, I felt like there was a disjunct with the way that Christianity was presented in kind of general Protestantism. It seemed like people's intuition were awakened in a proper way, but I would say that if you looked at how the world was presented, it was mostly like just basic materialism with a story layer on top of God becoming man and dying for your sins and all that. But there was no, like, there just seems like the connection was difficult to make, and it ended up forcing people to do all kinds of weird things, like embrace, try to talk about the Bible as if it's a scientific text, and try to defend scripture that way, and actually be suspicious of narratives, suspicious of story structures, because it would make them feel like it didn't really happen, that kind of stuff. So it led me into kind of a spiritual crisis, which was solved by just reading the church fathers, especially St. Gregory of Nyssa, St. Maximus the Confessor, and kind of the fathers that have a clear metaphysical underpinning to what they're talking about. And so then all of that kind of came together with iconography as well, discovering the ancient language of Christianity, this kind of universal language that it developed in the first millennia, and just how powerful it was. Like, it was really a map to reality is the only way to describe it.
By the way, my biggest apologies right now. I have to go for 2 minutes. There is a package, and they urgently need me to do something. I swear that's the reason. Gio, please
Don't worry,
take over. Yes.
He'll
Don't
have
worry
things to
about
talk
me.
about.
Yes, I have many things.
Oh, and also Sneed super chats. Sneed
Yes.
super chats.
I will show love. So super chats, of course, because it's an exciting opportunity, and hopefully this will be one of many encounters that we have. But let me ask you, usually people in North America, they tend to discover Orthodoxy through Father Seraphim Rose. It seems that being in Quebec, like Catholicism, like me being a Catholic, Catholicism is almost a natural. Well, I mean, post 60s Quebec, right? But it seems that Catholicism would be like a natural outgrowth. But what led you down the path of Orthodoxy instead? Was it just happenstance, or?
No, not at all. I mean, at first, I would say that I kind of became interested in tradition in general, reading the perennialists, like reading René Guénon and all of that. And so then, like a lot of people, through Guénon, I discovered Seraphim Rose, like you said. But my first kind of intuition was to go towards Catholicism, and so kind of looked around. But I was never baptized Catholic. Like I did. It's not like I grew up Catholic and I went away from it. And so I kind of looked around and felt and had the sense that I was going to jump into a ship that, like, it's like I was jumping into a church that was trying to be as Protestant as they could handle. And so I was leaving the Protestantism to go there. And so I got interested in kind of traditional Catholicism, kind of Fraternity of St. Peter stuff. But it just, at least at the time when I was looking into Christianity, looking into kind of traditional Christianity, it just wasn't available. Like I remember writing a priest and he answered me like a month later and he said, there are no liturgies nearby, but maybe in a few months we might do something. And so all of it, it looked weird. But some of my friends, at that time, we were a little crew of people who were exploring these ideas. My brother and a friend of his, and he ended up going towards Fraternity of St. Peter and is still there now, and he's still in the kind of Latin Christianity. But I would say that in retrospect, though, having discovered St. Gregory of Nyssa and St. Maximus and kind of discovering the hesychastic fathers and, the Jesus prayer, it just seems like in the end, it just Orthodoxy has preserved more of the mystical aspect of Christianity. And the iconography too, it's the same. I really did fall in love with medieval art, but medieval art just doesn't exist anymore. It would be in the Catholic Church, it would be something like an idiosyncrasy or kind of a nostalgic move. Whereas in Orthodoxy, there's nothing nostalgic about making icons at all. It's just the language, the community language of the church. And so it all kind of made more sense. And then like you said, also there are just events that happen where I met someone who was Orthodox and he kind of brought me into church during Lent at a pre-sanctified liturgy. And anybody who's been to a pre-sanctified, it's all candles and bowing to the ground and putting your face on the ground. And I was like, oh man, this is mine. Like I want this so much.
Well,
so yeah.
But it's funny you mentioned that about an idiosyncrasy. There is, by the late, I would say the very late Renaissance, going into the Baroque, going into then eventually Surrealism, it seems it is kind of anachronistic. There are some people, like of course Giovanni Gasparo, but that it does tend to come off as not a living tradition, but rather sort of, I guess you could say, as much as I love his art in particular, the the worship of ashes type of deal.
Yeah.
But what would you say, just because I really do want to talk about art, but now that we're on the Orthodoxy subject, what would you say to the question that people have of converts to Orthodoxy, or rather the criticism people would have that Orthodoxy is so inherently based to the, let's say, the ethnos.
Inherently based.
Inherently based. Oh, it is inherently based. I would agree. Orthodox people, they're absolute bros of us.
Yeah.
What would you say that these churches are so fundamentally based within the ethnos of their particular church, whether it be Serbian Orthodox, Ethiopian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, that really they almost are sort of quasi Caesaro-papist, and that really for someone who isn't of that ethnic base, then you won't quote unquote fully get that message? Or is that just more of like an
I also
unfair
want to add
criticism?
Well, I also want to add one
ahead,
thing into that question, which is, would you also consider the Russians, for example? I'm originally from St. Petersburg, Russia, by the way. Would you consider the Russians as people who kind of like pretty late into their history? You could even say that before that they weren't really called Russians, like there was the Kievan Rus and all that, but pretty much late into their history they adopted the Byzantine style when it came to the iconography and all that. So I'm curious about your response to Gio's question in relation to that kind of borrowing as well.
Yeah, well, I think that the example of the Russians is a good example to understand the manner in which we actually have like a map of how kind of the Byzantine, let's say the Byzantine spirit, or the spirit of the fathers and the spirit of iconography, the architecture, can be transferred to a completely different ethnic group and slowly kind of take on the flavor and the aspect of the group in which it's being assimilated. One of the issues we have today is that we're all in a hurry. Like everybody's in a hurry for it to happen really fast. And I think that that's the wrong approach. In America, we have two jurisdictions, I would say, the OCA and the Antiochian Church, that have made a great effort to, first of all, translate the liturgy into English and incorporate the good aspects of the West, as they slowly kind of, as you can see it. Like if you look at Orthodox converts today, they're all obsessed with Tolkien and they love C.S. Lewis. And, there are certain authors and certain people that they still will gather into their experience of Orthodoxy and will create a different flavor. And that's totally fine. And so, but it's going to be messy. It's going to be uneven, and it's going to go one direction. It's going to go a little too far into one direction and then a little too far in the other. It's the same with the converts. They're super strict. And then, so this stuff is going to happen. It's always going to be messy, but I think nonetheless that I really do see a possibility of a real integration. Like I've seen some, like the OCA in the South, for example, in the US is so well lived. And like there is this powerful like community, and there's all the good stuff of Protestantism, the sense of community, of like community involvement, tithing, like this idea of like, this is ours, we really need to give to it and participate in it, but then bringing in all the beauty of the Byzantine tradition. So I think it's definitely possible, but it's not going to be like an easy road. If people becoming Orthodox, like don't expect it to be easy. It's going to be hard.
And hopefully without the heretical nature of Protestantism.
Well, I also wanted to tie in what Gio was going to talk about art. There is also the subject of the various stages of consciousness that I wanted to get into a little bit later. But since we are on the subject of art, I wanted to ask your thoughts on Andrei Rublev. So for those who don't know Andrei, he was considered to be a famous Russian painter back during the 15th century. His most famous work being the Trinity. But what I'm curious about is there's Alexander Nevzorov, who is this famous Russian media figure who likes to dissect, and he's not a particularly religious man, but he likes to dissect a lot of different things that have gone on through the centuries. And when he was looking at the Trinity of Andrei Rublev, just the history of this very beautiful painting, the conclusion that he came to, based on the archives that he saw through, around the time of the USSR, like the beginning of the USSR, there was a specialist who went in there and started to peel away some of the topmost layers. And he ended up revealing a very different painting, one that you could say, based on, how many different layers it has gone through. Because again, it's like in a monastery, or it's something that's being exposed to a lot of light, a lot of candles, a lot of moisture. So you would keep drawing various layers on top, painting various layers on top. So my question is, would there have been something that would have considered to be, let's say, more holy and truer to whatever came, to whatever was the original, versus the layers that were added on top? Because certain things, for example, the cup, if you look at the icon, I'm going to link it in the chat.
Yeah, do you have the image live?
Yes, I do. So if you look at the icon over here, you will see that the cup looks pretty different from the saints themselves. Like it's kind of it's made of all these lines. And the other interesting thing to me is that the faces here, even, they retain a very different quality. So it may be that the faces were left alone and they were not chipped away, while the other layers you could see over here, there is evidence of painting being chipped away around here. And I am curious, like, what would you say would be the original true thing? The layers on top, would they also have the same holiness to them, or no?
Yeah, well,
that's a good question.
So the first thing to understand is that the holiness of an icon doesn't come from its paint. Right, the holiness of an icon comes from what is represented. The reverence posed to an icon is based on the prototype. That is, it's based on the image that you're encountering. So it's a very different approach to art than what we have now. We don't see, for example, the idea of modifying an icon, if it gets broken, is not at all a problem. Like, it doesn't bother anybody in the traditional world to modify it. If like an icon a part of it gets rubbed off, like just paint over it, because the image itself is what is being venerated. And so like the question you asked, for example, like to me, all of that sounds very much irrelevant. Like it's very irrelevant to wonder what is the original painting that was there. Just like to me, it's irrelevant to ask, like, is this little word, was it in the original scripture? Like that kind of approach that you get from modern scholars. So what makes Rublev's Trinity important too is that it was copied, and so it became the model for that image in Russian Orthodoxy, and it was actually officially asked by some councils to copy Rublev. Like if you're an iconographer, copy Rublev. If you want to make an image of the Trinity, copy Rublev. And so the life of the image of the Trinity of Rublev doesn't just exist in his painting, but exists in the network of copies and the reverence that network evokes for the original, and how that original then moves on into the actual image that it's representing.
To me, that's utterly fascinating, because it delivers the practice of icon painting and iconography, and to a certain extent other forms of art you find in Catholicism, beyond merely that which is aesthetic in terms of the work of art possessing, I guess, what Benjamin would call the aura. So there is this mark of originality. For example, conservationists, they like go at pains to not modify the painting, right? Whereas with iconography, it's not so much. And I think we'll get into this because I wanted to bring up this particular book. It's very similar to, for example, a lot of Zen art, a lot of Chinese literati painting, in that it's not so much even the direct name of the artists themselves that are doing it. For example, a lot of Basho's poems were pretty much from his students that he would like put under his name. It's more about the practice itself. So in that sense, so how would you differentiate the icon from merely the quote unquote aesthetic? Like, for example, what is the term energia? What is the energy of the icon?
Oh, that becomes very complicated. In the sense, I mean, the energy just means the way that it acts. Like it just means acting, like or the actions of something, or their energies, you know. And so so it's once again, you always have to remember like that the image is not just the paint, like it's not just the painting, right? There's something about it which is it's pointing towards the prototype. And so let's say Rublev captured something of that scene. So let's think about how he did it. So this image is an image which existed before. It's called the Hospitality of Abraham. And it's Abraham receiving the three angels, right? And so usually in the traditional image, you would have Abraham and his wife, and then you would have the angels in the middle, and then you would have someone sacrificing the animal. Like you would have all this stuff. And so Rublev was able to condense the image. So he took the tradition, it's a traditional image, and he condensed it in a way which revealed something about that event that resounded as being very true to the people who encountered it. And that's why it was copied, and that's why it was perpetuated as a tradition. And so maybe that is an answer to your question, in the sense that that's how the icon is acting in the world, but it's doing that by, it's like a mini revelation. So when you look at the image of Rublev's Trinity, you're able to encounter something about that event described in Scripture, which is revealing to you a mystery about God, about communion, about the Trinity, the way that they're looking at each other, the way that the space in front is open. There's all these theories about why it is that image has an effect on you. But of course, that description, like that's all secondary to the actual encounter with that image.
But then for me, the question here is, what can be gotten rid of in the image, or let's say replaced Ship of Theseus style, and still have it retain what is important? So for example, what I was showing earlier over here in the chat is you have the figure over here on the rightmost side. And if you look at the later rendition over here with the eyes,
the hair curls are gone too.
Yeah, the hair curls, and also the eyebrows are, let's say, more in line with the Eastern Orthodox over here, like the not a unibrow, but they're kind of close together. While over here, the eyebrows seem to be a little bit different. So for me, the question is, what is not important and what is important in terms of what makes the icon, or even with the nose. The nose over here is straight, and the nose in the other one is curved.
Well, do you mean the specific icon, or do you mean just make it an icon?
I guess in general.
An icon
so in general, it's very simple. Like an icon in general, for an icon to be an icon, it needs two things. Like canonically, it needs to have the name of the saint, and then it needs to have an image of the saint. That's what you need for it to be an icon, which is kind of recognized as an image in the church. Then from then on, it's really tradition. But tradition is not something that you can completely quantify. That's not the right approach, right? It's like if you're dancing and then I ask you, well, if you put your feet 2 feet to the right or 1 foot to the right, is it still the same dance? Or if you put it like six inches this way, is it still the same dance? I'm like, dude, I don't know how to answer that question. It's like dance and I'll tell you, right? Just dance in front of me and then I'll tell you if you're doing the dance or if you're not. But if you try to break it down in its specifics, then it doesn't hold.
But there still are certain canonical things, right? Like there is, for example, certain poses that have to be struck, certain outfits that have to be worn. If, let's say, we would have had somebody going, I don't know, off the tradition a little bit, take somebody like, and I know that this would not be in the same realm, but somebody like Giotto, for example, who, at least I see him as somebody who's in the middle of Renaissance and medieval style.
Or like Caravaggio would be a good example as well.
And if you were to have somebody who would go off and do their own thing in a way while still retaining what I would consider to be a holiness, would that be something that the church fathers, would annihilate them for?
So, okay, so let's look at a few things. First of all, what you're describing happened, and so the idea that the images that were painted in the time of Rublev, although some of the counselors just said copy Rublev, like because there was a lot of innovation, especially coming from the West, it didn't necessarily happen. The art in the Orthodox Church did become Western. It did become Renaissance, Baroque style, and then it collapsed. So in the late 19th century, early 20th century, it all of it collapsed. Even in the late 19th century, you would have struggled to find an icon painter. And you read in the 20th century, you read about people who are searching like in little villages to find people who paint icons. And so think of it as an art that almost died. Like it just came almost to its end. And now it's in the renovation of the icon that now we're wanting to make icons again. So we're asking ourselves, okay, I want to make icons, but obviously this art was started to break down. Why did it break down? And we look back, we start to look at the things which kept it alive, let's say, or the things which made it thriving and participate in the liturgy, and then we end up focusing on those things. But there's an intuition. There's something about tradition which is not this, which is it's like a human transmission. It's not always something which you can completely define. So a way to understand it would be something like this. If you're making an image, if you're making something which you want to integrate into a community, then you will have a certain approach to it. Like you'll do it in a certain way. Like if I'm making a guitar for a guitar player, I will make it so that the guitar player can play it. Mm-hmm. So if I'm trying to make a new guitar that has, like 25 strings and I'm like, here, someone ordered a guitar for me and I make this weird guitar, then the guy is going to say, well, what is this? Like, why are you giving me this thing? And so it's the same with something like icons. Like I make an icon to be integrated into a community, into a church, into something that a language that already exists. And so if I write a letter, I'm not going to make up words because I want my letter to be understood. So if I make an image, I'm not going to make up stuff because I want it to enter into communion. And so it's a better approach than trying to find the elements, like to say, if it doesn't have this, then it's not an icon. Then it doesn't. Every time someone does that, I will find an icon that has exactly the things you're saying are not iconographic, because there's actually quite a bit of variety. But it's the wrong question to ask, because why are you trying, like, let's say you're making an image.
I can explain why, actually.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about the 19th century and so on and so forth, of course, you could say that the rivers of information were overflowing and people started to...
Why did Orthodox icons fall off at that period? I mean, I know it was pretty much suppressed during the, but even before...
It's Peter. It's Peter the Great.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So Peter the First tried to create a kind of Protestant church, I guess, tried to subjugate the church to
got rid of the old believers, for instance.
Yeah, and so he subjugated the clergy. The clergy basically became state employees at that point, and he wanted to be a French aristocrat, and so he imported artists from Italy, and he started to want to change the art and kind of pushed towards this renovation. And so that's what happened. And so now people look back and see that period as the start of the decline of Orthodoxy in Russia and leading to the revolution, basically. And so we're saying, okay, well, let's not do that again. Let's now find the elements which are kind of universal and can be perpetuated now. And modernism is part of that. Like modernism has also made it possible to make icons. There's a very good connection between Maurice Denis and some of the French Catholic modernists and the renewal of icons that happened in France, because the renewal of icons started to really appear in the Russian emigres in Paris. And so like the breakdown of the hold on perception that the Renaissance and the Baroque and the neoclassical kind of imposed on us, that break made it possible for the ancient language of the icon and the medieval language to kind of be understood again in a fresh way. Almost kind of like how postmodernism strangely now makes it possible to be Christian again. Like it's like, okay, you break down I just want to be my thing. Like just let me be my thing, and then that's fine.
But that's right up my alley. That's a lot of work that I've done both in art and in writing. But it's first of all, as an
Gio's
Italian,
a brilliant artist, by the way.
Oh, I'm not that brilliant, not compared to Jonathan here.
Yes,
I mean,
yes,
we both work with wood, though. I'm more of a print maker. He's an icon carver. But that's
and $20 patronage, $30 patronage gives you a beautiful print from Gio.
Lev, if you could throw up well, it's not my finest woodcut, but that Fiowen GF series.
Here, I'm gonna search for.
But as an Italian, I'm deeply
sorry.
I'm deeply sorry. We totally pigeonholed Christian art. I'm very sorry. But it's fascinating though. Oh God, what you were saying about how it's not so much the comportment of the artist as an individual. I guess what Heidegger would call subjectivism, of the sort of the idea of like formalism, the art for art's sake. It's rather just Orthodox iconography evolving for that particular people, that particular time. I think it's sort of like, it's a more nuanced idea than what people normally think of in terms of the icon being like this hardcore, you have to follow these steps, you have to paint by the numbers. You're saying like, I remember in preparation for this, one of my favorite books on art is actually by an Orthodox, and I think your journal reviewed it, Icons in Time, Persons in Eternity. That's one of my favorite art theory books. And they were talking about how from Byzantine art onwards in Russia and Greece and elsewhere, there was sort of the different flavors and different sort of appearances of Orthodox icons. So it's not really this very like rigidified series of just replicating a tradition. So
but I do want to push back a little bit on that, just if we're talking about not the 1900s or 1800s, even like pre-Peter the Great time. I think this goes to a real primal thing that a lot of people online around Geosphere are dealing with.
No,
when it comes to no,
as soon as
here
you
we
mention
go.
Russian history, Lev's gotta go off.
Yes, when it comes to the balance of order and chaos. Because from what I understand, back in the day, it was pretty damn strict when it came to all of these church fathers making sure that things were done in a very specific way. If we're talking, again, about 15th century, 14th century, like around that time, it was very strict, and there were incredibly harsh punishments that would be leveled to people if they did not follow suit.
Yeah.
So I am curious, how would you say the more traditional-leaning communities are dealing with, let's say, the bursting forth of modernity now that there isn't this Sam Hyde-style necklock to hold everybody in place?
Okay, so I feel like there's a lot of things in your question. First thing I would say is in terms of the art. Let's just for now stick with the art. The way to understand it, once again, is to understand that originality or non-originality or have no value in themselves. Like this is one of the problems. The problem is that you have two extremes, which is you have this extreme desire to be original and to be different and to do my own thing. And then you have this, someone reacts and says, no, you have to copy everything, just copy. And the reality is that that's not how tradition works. Tradition doesn't work that way. Tradition is actually far more flexible, but also looks more rigid to us moderns, because why would you change it if you don't need to change it? Like, you don't change something to change it just because you're bored with it. There's a natural way in which things will adapt to their milieu that will kind of be embodied in different spheres. And there'll be all kinds of reasons why that difference will appear. But no one is like doing it on purpose. And so, like, the Russians aren't saying, well, we need to make a Russian version of these Byzantine icons, or else, what's up with that? They're not saying that. They're just making Byzantine icons. And then in 200 years, then all of a sudden they're Russian Byzantine icons, and no one noticed. It just happened because that's how reality works. It's like, you do something, you're making it's like your mother's pound cake tastes different from the one you would get at the store. But it's not like your mother said, oh, well, I need to be different from the store. No, she's just making a pound cake the best way she can. The best way.
How do we know there weren't any mothers, though, around that time that decided to put some other ingredients in the pound cake, and they got pounded for putting those ingredients in the pound cake as a result?
I mean, I'm certain that, like, for example, like a young iconographer, let's say a young monk who's wanting to paint icons and is doing weird things, would have been maybe slapped in the back of the head by, the older monk, and it's like, what are you doing? What is this? Like, but then it would have just, and then that person just wouldn't have gotten commissions anyways. Like, if someone was doing something really weird, then they just wouldn't have gotten commissions, and then we wouldn't know about them because no one would have cared about what they were doing. Like, idiosyncrasy has a natural way of disappearing in a traditional world. It's not that it doesn't exist. It's just that it just kind of vanishes because no one really attends to it too much. And so a good example would be that even in the West is a good example. Like, even in the Middle Ages, in the manuscript tradition, there's far more variety because it was private. There was room to, it just happened normally because it's private, that there's less stricture. But let's say if you're going to make an image in public for 500 people that go to church, then you want the people to see it and say, oh yeah, that's an image of the Ascension. You don't want people to go like, what, like, what is this? What is he doing? That's not that. You don't want to draw attention to that. You want people to recognize it. And so it's more about embodied living. Like, it's about the way in which communities come together, the way in which, and so you're right. There probably was some stricture in terms of the iconographers, but some of those iconographers, like some of the really famous ones, there's some wild stuff in their icons. There's some pretty wild stuff. It's just that sometimes that wild stuff like kind of didn't land or didn't continue to be perpetuated. Like, there's some weird images at Mount Athos of like in the apse of the Holy of Holies, where it's like baby Jesus cut up into pieces inside the chalice. And it's like, that exists, but it didn't become like the normal practice of
what
the church.
What year is that one? I would love to take a look at that.
It's probably like 16th, 17th. It's probably around there. It's not that late.
Just like the later Baroque and Mannerism. I mean, you had all sorts of weird dragons and ghouls and like Zobadon painting hands within the eyes. And so I guess, but also I think there's just a natural mannerism that comes with the character of each location in each time. Let's fast forward before we get into the real heavy art discussion. What was iconography looking, not what it looked like, but what was the conditions of iconography under two movements? So let's say under Russian cosmicism, so like the Russian modern art from Malevich onwards, and also under the Soviet Union. I don't think iconography was fared very well under the hands of Stalin and Brezhnev, but I don't know.
Yeah, well, at the beginning there was like a purge, just like everything. You do see images of icons kind of gathered into, hundreds of icons gathered into carts and then burnt or at first there was like, obviously just like Stalin, I think Stalin destroyed 30,000 churches. And so a lot of the icons would have been in churches, like they wouldn't have been. So that definitely took care of a lot of the art. And then the second move, which was smart, was to say, oh, this is all history. Like this is all historical art. Yeah. So let's remove it from the churches and let's put it into nice, pristine museums where we can look at them as artifacts of a time gone by. So that was a smart move, like in terms of politics, right? To turn it into like a historical document. And so then it was pretty much frowned upon. Like painting icons was very frowned upon, and it was something which you kind of had to do. You had to kind of do in semi-secret, you know. So that's what ended up happening.
And what do you think of yeah, Gio thinks you're wrong. Thoughts to we'll get. I don't know if I think me and Jonathan Pageau, we have probably more agreement than disagreement. But no, but I mean, Russian modernism is very fascinating, especially within the context of Orthodox icons. For example, when Malevich came out with his famous black square in the gallery that like utterly horrified art critics, he put it right in the corner center of the room, which is, as you know, where I forget which particular icons, but that's like the
it's called the bright corner. So every house would have had in the most eastern corner would have had their icons there, and that's when, you know, like when they would pray, or if they would pray before meals, or if they would pray in the evening or in the morning, they would look towards, they would stand in front of the icon, sometimes with the lamp or a hanging lamp or something. So obviously Malevich was definitely aiming towards the understanding that people had of icons. The same with Kandinsky. Kandinsky definitely had certain icon theories, like theories of symbolism, that were also coming out in terms of a lot of the imagery, a lot of the symbolism around icons actually comes from an early modern text, like Iconostasis by Father, what's his name? Pavel Florensky. It's not Florensky, it's the other one. Anyways, that's horrible that I don't remember his name. Sorry. So a lot of the kind of symbolism and this approach to icons actually comes from early modern priests that talked about it. So, and the idea of inverse perspective comes from the early modern period as a reaction to the influx of so there is a discussion happening for sure. And like I said, I think that there's definitely, in modernism, there's definitely a desire to go back and to use some of that imagery to break down the current paradigm. You know, you see it in Europe for sure. Like European modernists are using older images to break down, to like attack the current paradigm.
Especially academicism that was rigidified in a lot of the academies. I mean, the Impressionists say no more, but what's interesting about Malevich is that now the sort of the feeling of color itself and the picture plane becomes this totalizing space of expression. No longer is it representation. But would you say that and I want to read this quote by my good friend Matthew, who's also a brilliant artist. Would you say that the icons in some ways break or subvert or go beyond mere artistic representation as sort of like a similitude to the natural world, to the face, for instance?
Okay, so this is the way that I see it, because there's a lot of discussion right now. I have to be careful what I say. Like right now, there's an intense discussion about the problem of icons and abstraction, and it's actually a pretty hot debate in the world of icon painting right now. So one of the things that in the revival of the 20th century icon, for sure, those who revive the icon specifically use kind of modern vision of art, which is this idea of abstraction, this idea of reduction of the form in order to arrive to show spiritual qualities. You know, like you see, like the idea of Mondrian's ideas of like simplified, or a lot of the modernists had this idea of like simplifying reality so that you kind of see the spiritual form behind it. So definitely the revival of the icon was couched in that kind of language. Now, I would tend to want to couch it a little differently. Also, because we've had a lot of blowback from scholars who say no one ever talked about it before like that. Like no one ever talked about icons that way. On the contrary, they talked about the liveliness of icons and how they looked alive. This is how they described them. And so my approach has mostly been to talk about the difference between like center and periphery, or let's say something like concentric and something which moves towards idiosyncrasy. And I think that icons, because of the canon in the early church, which was that you weren't allowed to represent things which would awaken the passions in someone. Mm-hmm. Like that was the language of the fathers, was to say you should represent scandalous things in church. You shouldn't represent things that would awaken the passions. And so you look at the change which happened, which they took Roman tropes, they took contrapposto, they brought it in slightly so that it's not as excessive. You know, the clothing became covering, but the tropes in the even in the folds were still Roman, but they were made simpler and they were made more pointed, you could say, to avoid suggestion, to avoid more kind of erotic suggestion. And I think that that's the way to see it, is to understand it as aesthetic. It's like Orthodox icons are aesthetic. They want you to focus on the image, the face. Like they want you to focus on this encounter and not distract you by the seduction of the forms, let's say.
Of this young lady over here, right? Because she has similar looking eyebrows and noses that I've noticed in the Eastern Orthodox style, but this would have been, I think this would have been an earlier work. This was from mummies that they found. And so what you're saying is that this would be too hot and they had to lower down the...
Well, I think this is probably, except I would think that this is very similar to some of the things you would see in icons, especially the early kind of icons. The Fayum portraits were definitely an influence in terms of the style and the way that things were painted. And so, like I said, it really was just it was an organic thing. And then at some moments it's maybe a little more luscious, and then at some moments it can be more austere. The Russians tended to be even more austere than the Greeks. Yeah. And so I think that's the way to understand it. But so in terms of understanding the encounter, it would have been something like, I think this is how I imagine it, is that the person who would look at an icon would actually see a person. But that's because that's where life was placed in that world. Life was placed in the simplicity of the stare, in the not the desire to seduce, to impress, to make you laugh, but rather in this kind of direct encounter. And so that's why they would have seen in the icon, which to us looks almost abstract, they would have rather seen more liveliness, because they didn't see the idiosyncrasy as being where life was. They saw this more heart approach, a heart-centered approach to art.
I get what you mean. Like when a huge part when I was in grad school, a huge part when I took when I was my thesis was basically the aesthetic philosophy of China and Zen art. And a big influence on me was a sinologist by the name of Francois Julian, and he talked about how in literati painting you have this intentional vagueness that opens up a sort of, it negates a finitude to art itself. It sort of opens up a beyond, or what Heidegger would call a sort of clearing of what is to come. It's lively because it expresses that which isn't there. It's a paradox. By taking away, you give life to the painting. You negate that sort of the idiosyncrasies of a specific expression.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, he has this one chapter in the book, "The Great Image Has No Form," which is, of course, one of the verses from the Tao Te Ching. He says it's a chapter called "The Impossible Nude." There is no nude in Chinese art. I mean, later in China and Japan, with
Japanese art, there was.
Yes and no. That came much later.
Yeah, it's very late.
Yeah, the kabuki theater, ukiyo printmaking. But before that, they didn't conceive of it as an aesthetic, and it was impossible to show explicit nudity, whereas opposed to like Western paintings at the time, because eroticism was much different. It was something that is a suggestion to what is to come, rather than the full presence of a naked body, which is merely just titillation. So I get what you mean. The essence of something is in its act of revealing rather than its full presence. Whereas in a lot of like Western, specifically Mediterranean and certain forms of Scandinavian art, it is just like the full presence of the body. And that is, objective, right? So,
Well, could we also build a bridge from the Egyptian hieroglyphics or the archaic Greek art, where you could say people were more puppet-like, and according to people, let's say like Julian Jaynes, who talked about there being the bicameral mind during the Bronze Age, where people, according to him, would have thought that the voice of God or gods were talking to them and were telling them to do something, and the view there was that there was this idea of people being more puppets than they were the actual participants. The gods moved the people, and it's pretty similar in a way to what you were talking about with Jordan Peterson in your last episode with him, talking about how ideas have people rather than people having ideas. And that brings me to something that I really wanted to talk with you about. So I promise, Gio, this is not going to take long. I had my first,
which means it will take long.
No, it won't. No, it won't. Everybody subscribe, by the way. So I think my first lucid dream, I was in the cabin, and then I saw a rabbi, and I am half Jewish, by the way, from my mom's side. Well, I guess that means I'm fully Jewish. But anyway, I saw this rabbi, and he told me that there are two kinds of evil. One kind of evil is the one where you intentionally do something to hurt somebody, but the other kind of evil is pretty much stretching all the way to pretty much anything you end up doing at all, which would involve you getting something out of it. And I think the reason why I had that dream is because in the Kabbalah, they talk about how human beings receive and don't give. And the process through Kabbalah, and as I take it through various other mystical traditions, is to transmute that egoistic desire to receive into the desire to give for the sake of giving. And after that, what I started thinking about and looking up all these various pieces of art that people drew where it did look like they were puppets moved by the gods, or you could look at more primitive art from tribal societies, that there does seem to be a dream state that people are in within a closed circle of consciousness, where all they know are the particular things that are around their world. They are moved by Mother Nature to act in a certain way. And another thing that I fear, by the way, is with artificial intelligence and robotization, it was also going to create a closed circle. But the reason why I'm saying this is I'm curious where you stand on the hierarchy of consciousness, and whether you see there being a certain transformation people can go through where they start becoming much more aware, and with the awareness of what exactly is going on around them, it's a slightly different thing than, maybe it's a really different thing than having people just as a group being used to certain traditions and doing it like in a robotic way. We are actually now conscious of certain things that are taking place, as opposed to it being, oh, if I do this wrong thing, I'm going to get punished, which I think was the mentality that, let's say, the Russians had during the medieval time, where they had somebody like Alexander Nevsky, who was an underboss for the Golden Horde and was burning down villages that didn't pay him, yet they made him a saint, and they prayed for the health of the Khan and his family. So to me, like, that kind of mindset is way more, let's say, and I don't want to use the word roboticized, I would use the word just like being like in a group state. And do you think that there is something to, whether individual or group oriented, raising one's level of awareness? And do you think this is kind of the journey that people may be on today with all the information that's out there?
So there's a lot in what you said, obviously. I would say that the idea that there's a hierarchy in terms of consciousness, maybe the fathers never used the word consciousness, but I'm fine with it. That's fine. Like that there's a hierarchy of being, that you ascend a ladder. This is something which is there, from it's been there forever. It's not at all something new. And as you ascend the ladder, especially in Christianity, you do become free. Like you become free from your passions. You become free from all these little demons that are ruling over you, let's say. And you become free in a way. You could say you can become free from the law, but not because you can then do whatever you feel like, but rather as you become free from your passions, you don't need the law. Like it becomes the law in your heart. Like it becomes the law that flows out from you. And so the way to understand it is that when you're down there at the bottom, like, and you're not much, then yeah, you need laws. Like you need people to tell you how to do things, because then things go crazy. If it's like the let's say the type of person that is very passionate, if they don't have or even yourself in the moments where you're very passionate, then a good rule will help you to kind of hold that line. But it's obviously supposed to be on a ladder towards transformation. And so the people in Russia who were peasants and couldn't read and would just kind of follow what the church said and just kind of did what they were told, that's actually totally fine. Like that's fine. But you could also go to a monastery and you could go to the caves, and then you could learn to pray the Jesus prayer, and then you could go into ecstasy and be completely freed from your passion. So it was available to anybody who was willing to kind of go down that line, and it was always there. But now, in terms of the internet, I think that people are confusing opinion and information with transformation of being. That's not the same. It's like you have the angry woke or the angry red-pilled guy online who thinks he's got it covered and he's just typing away and arguing on Twitter, and then he goes from that to porn, and it's like and to video games. It's like, okay, dude, seriously, man. That's not what it's about. Like that's not what the transformation is. It's not just about having the right political opinion and being in the right political camp. And so I think that I do believe that if you're transformed personally, if you get rid of your passions, if you learn a prayer discipline, if you do well, if you help others, all of that stuff is going to transform you. And then you will, I believe, have more balanced and more appropriate vision of reality. I do believe that.
Well, it's like, it's almost similar, I would say, to Vedanta, where they say, once you have achieved moksha, you no longer need the dharma. Not that you're going to go out and, kill people and watch internet porn, but it's more so that you've gone.
Well, if you do those things, though, I think you'd get punished much more severely in terms of what lies ahead for you.
But in terms of what Lev was saying about different art forms, for example, in the Amazon basin, you have the Icaros, which are songs from the ancestors and from the deities of, for example, Quetzalcoatl, and there's these very colorful abstract patterns that they paint, and there's certain other visionary painters that incorporate them. But my fear is that really people treat them like they do with icons, as merely a quote unquote aesthetic, whereas they're really just spiritual practice. For instance, my good friend, who is also another brilliant artist of mine, I would consider a personal good friend of mine, Matthew, in the chat, he said, letting artists indulge their idiosyncrasies within the dialectic of Western art in general allows you to reach more glorious highs, but more crushing lows. It is what it is. So what would you say? And then he said, he's arguing about the nude in art. For example, you wouldn't have Rodin or Klimt if the teacher had metaphorically smacked them on the back of the head and scrubbed their works. I guess.
Do you think? Yeah. Okay. I mean, I get it. It's just that it depends. So maybe that's a good way of understanding it, is that there is a possibility for things to be too high. The incarnational model is different from this idea of elite, extremely smart, extremely intelligent, extremely, high aesthetic works. That I don't think that that's helpful any more than I think that, ads or really kind of basic, boring use of visual imagery to induce your passions, like a lingerie ad and some extremely esoteric work of contemporary art. I think that those are actually just kind of mere reflections of each other. And like the fact that some like highfalutin elitist can look at the high one and think that somehow they're better than everybody because they've been initiated into the mysteries. It's like that work of art is not doing anything for you. Like, it's not making you a better person. I'm sorry. It's just not. I mean,
It
maybe
really
some are, but there's not, at least not now. Like, maybe there was some residue of that in the 19th century, maybe early 20th. But right now, seriously, like all the contemporary artists, is there anything? Like, is there anybody?
I would say there's a few.
Geo. That's who.
No, well, there's Jonathan Pageau, of course. I would say, I mean, you're gonna balk at this. And by the way, shout out to my friend Paul Talk. I don't know if you know the YouTuber. He's also a he's a Rococo painter. He loves the Rococo. Paul Rhodes.
I love the Rococo.
But look up Paul Talk, like seriously. Yeah. I would say, I know you're gonna just like, my God, you're gonna be like, Geo is crazy. I would say that there's certain artists now, as much as I don't like a lot of the YBA, the young British artists, I think a lot of them are, hacks. I would say the closest that would come to that experience, in my opinion, would be Damien Hirst.
Wow.
Yes. I know, right?
I thought, like, the only modern, like, contemporary famous artist that I think had some value for me was Kiefer. Just because just at least he was trying to deal with the problem of art in a way that wasn't just
in the bricolage of history.
Yeah, it wasn't just like looking over it. And he understands the problem even of, I mean, he's making money from it, but he at least is trying to kind of wallow in the problem. But why Hirst?
Well, here's a mandala.
Well, I will go on about Hirst. By the way, I also want to shout out if you could look up my good friend Philip Daniel. He is a atonal. He loves atonal, like more contemporary classical music. He is a brilliant musician, composer. I would say Damien Hirst because his work. I wrote an article about this, which is I will release again someday. The website's sort of been lost to history. Damien Hirst, especially his more works that he's not the kitschy ones, the butterflies or whatnot, the polka dots. I would say that some of his works are a powerful meditation on the nature of death and the nature of being towards death, the nature of our situation being fixated upon the finality of it. And so in a sense, he is one of the very few contemporary artists that was able to really put that more ancient primordial consciousness of the finality of being into a contemporary art context, because in some ways, believe it or not, in my opinion, it's almost implicitly reactionary in the sense of his consciousness towards that which is the unknown. And so I think, in my opinion, Damien Hirst is one of the few, along with Anselm Kiefer, to an extent with Francis Bacon before, that could really bring an awareness of us as hypermoderns to something which is very ancient, something which is very grounding in a sense. And despite the media flair and the sort of, hideous, repetitious high kitsch of people like Warhol, even in Warhol, you have this consciousness of the modern condition being something that has, in one sense, disconnected us, disassembled our relation to what we know as tradition and what we know as sort of an awareness of our mortality. But in the sense, through that pointing of our disconnect, we can arrive at something very almost implicitly reactionary. Because Warhol, in the end of the day, he's saying to us, the mass object is that which not just enslaves us, but that which informs our visual consciousness.
Yeah.
And the infinite repeatability of it is, in a way, this inverted, counter-initiatory, bastardized iconography. For example, when his paintings of the celebrities, his I'm getting my words tied.
Yeah,
silk screens. Go ahead.
But you're totally right. I think you're completely right. And I agree with what you said about Hirst. And I definitely agree with what you said about Warhol.
Wow.
And I also agree. I think that it was all there in Marcel Duchamp right at the outset.
Yes.
Like, it was all there right at the beginning. But the difficulty, becomes the difficulty, is that what is the purpose of art? Like, why do we make these things? And so, like, is it only a literary reflection of the world in which we live? Or or are we calling people towards more? Like, is that the point? And so,
Well, Jonathan, real quick, I just
Yeah.
wanted to share this piece with you. This is what I'm working on right now. One of my latest NFTs. It's called Musculls, and so there's a lot of details in here that are going on. And if you ask me, like, why do I make this craziness? I think it's because I like to be playful. I like going into this realm where I grab a lot of these creatures out. And look, they don't mean no harm. Like, sure, there's like these fish with these sharp teeth and they're doing some weird stuff. But still, it's like, I think that there is an aspect of reality where we like to play around. We like to do ridiculous stuff. And it doesn't mean that we have malice. And it doesn't mean that you could say that we're trapped within a certain Maya, a certain illusion, a certain cycle. But at the same time, I wouldn't necessarily say that that would prevent us from doing good works towards others. And
so let's look at your NFT. Like, let's look at it. Let's talk about it.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
So
it's not done yet, by the way.
So imagine yourself in a medieval world. Okay.
Oh God.
Wait, like, imagine yourself in a medieval world. Everything that's in that image existed pretty much.
Yeah.
Almost to a T. And so
Bregel and Bosk,
all of the weird stuff, even before that, like I'm talking Middle Ages. Bosch is not Middle Ages anymore.
Oh yeah.
I'm talking like 12th century, 13th, 14th century. In marginalia, that's where all the freaky stuff happened. So in a manuscript, you would have an image of the Mother of God or of Christ or something important in the center. And then on the edge of the image, you would have ornamentation. And in that ornamentation, you would have things that are so completely crazy and obscene sometimes and vulgar and scatological. All that stuff was all there.
A lot of the woodcuts of those period as well.
So
yeah.
If you imagine now in a medieval church, you would have the same. You would have the altar in the center. You would have this sacred space, and you would have this important image. And then if you looked outside, you looked in the corners, all the weird stuff would start to appear. So you look at the outside of the church, you would have gargoyles. In the details of the church, you would have freaky kind of imagery. And so that type of stuff, like, let's say this reflection of the idiosyncrasy of the world, it's there, it exists. It's like it's part of the world. You can't deny it. You don't want to deny it. It's always about where is it? Like, what place does it have? And so you could say that today, the art of today, it's basically the gargoyles of a huge story. We're basically at the end of a world, and now we're manifesting all the monsters. Like, they're all kind of coming out, and we're all obsessed with hybrids, and we're all obsessed with monsters, and we're all obsessed with all this stuff that is on the edge of the story. And so it's normal, but it's also helping us to understand where we are, like, in the world. We're on the edge. We're standing next. We're at the edge of the world near the ocean where all the monsters are. That's where we are. That's where
have you looked into a lot of I know a lot of it's like totally academies, but have you looked into, for example, posthumanist studies, object-oriented people that talk about our relation to hybridity and what do they call it? The limbs? What do they call that?
Prosthetics?
Prosthesis and our relation to the critical animal and all of these things that sort of distort the picture of the human. But what you're saying is that in the consciousness, in a religious consciousness, but also in the consciousness of Christianity in particular, the sort of essential view of the human being within the image of God, that all of this stuff complicates it, and that in a time of sort of great calamity and chaos, now we're going to have academics that talk about how like Donna Haraway talking to her dog, it's sort of like, or the cyborg.
But you're right. Cyborg. So the idea of a cyborg is really important. It's part of the development of. So there's a story, like in scripture, you have a little cosmos that happens, and it starts with creation and it ends with the flood. And if you want to understand how a world happens, you can really just study what's there. And in the descendants of Cain, you find all this development of technology. And also in like the traditions, like in the Enoch traditions, that also includes seduction, and it includes making hybrids. It includes a chimera. All of this stuff happens in the development of this technology as you're moving towards dissolution, basically.
Atlantis.
So you come to the end, and then here comes the flood. So so Gio's right. Like the fact that we're obsessed with hybridity, with the question of how technology enters into our consciousness, like, or let's say how technology becomes an extension of our consciousness. This is showing us the situation. Like it's showing us where we are. Like one of the last videos I did is on that. I talk about the mark of Cain, but in that video, I talk about the question of technology and how the problem of what technology is and the difficulty that it poses. And especially if we're fascinated by technology and fascinated by exteriority, then we go into these tropes that are inevitable and lead towards where we are now, lead towards gender confusion, leads towards identity confusion, leads toward all of this weird stuff.
It also reminds me of, are you familiar with Jason Giorgiani by any chance? Okay, so Jason Giorgiani talks about Prometheus, and he had a whole book about it named Prometheus and Atlas. His conclusion was that, let's say we have the archetype of somebody like Jesus Christ, for instance, somebody who sacrificed his life for the sake of everybody else. Giorgiani sees a similar archetype within Prometheus, who stole the fire of the gods, gave the fire to the human beings, and he sees Prometheus, even in the name Prometheus, according to him, and I have to look this up just to make sure, but I'm pretty sure that it means forethought. It means to be able to see ahead. And what he sees in the archetype of Prometheus as well as Atlas is this mapping out of the world that we are in a way having more of this consciousness as opposed to being more in a puppet-like state like I was referring to before. And with that, though, the interesting thing to me is you would get to more responsibility where all of a sudden you may suffer a lot more and you may pay the ultimate price for doing things that may be heretical to a certain kind of order. But the other interesting thing there is that the fire of the gods, to me, it's never really been about, oh, humans have this fire, now they can cook, and because they can cook, their brain starts developing differently. Maybe it's that too, but for me, the significance of fire of the gods has a lot more to do with something like Kundalini Shakti, for instance. This primal energy that's referred to as Vril, that's referred to as Chi. Yeah, exactly. The idea being is that you go down in, and the energy is located in the base, the root chakra, and you're supposed to transmute that sexual energy to go up, and as it goes up, and again, this is something that I've experienced in myself as well, as the energy goes up, all of a sudden, the things that occupy yourself start changing as well. And it doesn't mean that would substitute doing good works by any means, but I do see it in a way as having more realization and continuing on this as above so below idea of, the breathing in and out of the universe, Jesus descending into Sheol and then coming back up. Just these patterns that we keep seeing over and over again. So I'm curious what your thoughts are regarding that.
Okay, so I would say at first, my first reaction is that there's a little bit of confusion, I would say, in terms of, okay, so the idea of comparing Jesus to Prometheus is disturbing, very disturbing to me. Because
Giorgiani has a very negative opinion on Christianity, by the way.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah. So you can understand it this way, is that if your attention is focused up, right, then all the things below serve that which is above. But if your attention is focused down, then you want to exercise power, and then these things that are down there become tools to exercise power over what's below you. Okay, so that's the difference. Now, so the idea is that everything in the hierarchy is good, all the tools are good. It's all about attention. And so a good example, Adam and Eve, they're standing in front of the tree. It says, God says, don't eat the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. Adam says, I want this fruit for myself, takes it, eats it. That's bad. Fall, go down, tumble down into chaos, into death. Solomon, standing in front of God. God says, what do you want? Solomon says, I want the knowledge of good and evil. God says, yes, here you go. You have the knowledge of good and evil. And now you can make the temple. So same story, two different things, two different.
Solomon did end up suffering towards the end, at least from certain texts.
Yeah, that's because he did end up go too far in the down. Like he took the down too far. But the idea is that there is a difference. Like one is seen as a good and the other is seen as a problem. And it's the same with all this whole problem of technology, which is that one of the difficult, so the idea is that the fire from the gods it wasn't supposed to be stolen. If you steal the fire from the gods, then you will apply it to making yourself more powerful. You'll apply it to protecting yourself. You'll apply it to submitting others. You'll apply it to subjugating the people around you. And that's the thing with the knowledge of good and evil. If you instrumentalize it, then you'll use it to control others. But the image of technology is neither good nor bad. It has a double image, right? One image is the city of Cain, which is Cain killing his brother like Romulus and tumbling down, building these walls to protect himself, and kind of exteriorizing the other and all of this kind of stuff. And then the other image is the temple, which is the layers of the divine manifesting themselves in different layers of reality until the edge of the world. So you have on the one hand the city of Cain, and then you have the New Jerusalem at the end of time. Both of them are images of technology, but one comes from above, and one is like, I want to control others. I'm going to take these for myself. And it's very different.
There is a slight middle ground, though, if I may. I just want to illustrate it. And again, I'm not fully attached to this being indeed the case. But if we are, for example, I know, if we are, for example, talking about there being different hierarchies of consciousness where we're surrounded by planets, galaxies, all this kind of stuff here, where, at least to me, I am doubtful that the only experience of this great transformation that, let's say, would be displayed in the sacrifice that Jesus Christ made would be limited to specifically this one spot in this one time, regardless of all the other planets and galaxies that are around. Be that as it may, my own leaning on certain things is that when it comes to these archetypes that Jung talked about, people end up being representatives of those archetypes, where you would have somebody who would be representative of Apollo, somebody who would be representative of Prometheus. And it doesn't mean that they are specifically those people, but to me, the big problem that I have with organized religion in general, and I would be very interested in your response to this, is if we are looking at those two ways that you talked about before, either becoming a monk, becoming solo, or being with a group of people and being more obedient to your uppers, to the people that are above you. In this case, it would be the clergy in Russia, let's say. My great-great-grandmother, I'm not sure how many greats there are in there, but however many there are, she was saved by her neighbor, who she got along really well with, from the pogroms that were going on in the Pale of Settlement during that time in Russia. The pogroms themselves were instituted and carried out by the church authorities. In that sense, the people who are supposed to have the biggest responsibility to instill the message of Jesus Christ end up using it in the most perverse, animalistic way. And this would also harken back to, let's say, the idea that Johnny believes in, which, again, I'm going to be agnostic when it comes to this. He believes
technology that Christianity would suppress some great innovation.
Not even that.
Man.
That's part of it, but also it would be that certain people that we talk about in history who would inhabit these archetypes, there would be, let's say, a Zeus archetype, for instance, somebody who, assuming, and I'm really going on a limb here, fella, so just bear with me, assuming that there are more things in our history of humanity that we are not aware of as far as who we are, where we came from. I mean, I think that we are all made in the image of God. But regardless of that I would say is like the center of the mandala. But when you go out from the mandala, as far as various historical, semi-legendary figures that are talked about, for all I know, there may have been people who had a huge degree of power that influenced that power who we called gods. And there may have been somebody who did not want the people who are below them to just be a bunch of sheep that are going to be just kowtowing down to them, but wanted to raise their level of awareness. And you could say that that's a very dangerous thing to do. But this is kind of where I am right now, so I am curious where the balance would lie for you on the raising of this awareness, so that people aren't just going to take the order of the priest to kill all the Jews because they killed Jesus and get them to a higher level.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to admit, I didn't know that if the programs were officially let's say, promulgated by the church itself, or if it was like rogue clergy.
No,
that
it was not
it.
rogue. It was absolutely instrumentalized by the church.
Well, anyways,
yeah. Well, it's possible, and that would definitely be an evil that the church has done. The church has obviously done evil things. I mean, these things. How can I say this? It's like the idea that there's a normal hierarchy in the world doesn't mean that there won't be bad things that are going to happen to people, right. and it's going to happen. There's going to be moments where things kind of get out of whack. And, the image, I would say that for me, like the image of Constantinople in its glory is, let's say, like the best image of this image where everybody went to school, where there was education, there was all of this, it wasn't, the completely ignorant peasant and, the clergy that almost was semi-ignorant themselves. There really was a remembering of ancient education, a remembering of the ancient world, but also this kind of transformation of it into the life of Christ. And so that would be the ideal, but it's obviously going to go off the rails sometimes. And so there are moments where that definitely happened. And so it's good to look at those moments and to say, that's not good. And we have a way to do it. Like we have the words of Christ, and we have the deeper tradition of the church to help us see when the tradition goes off the rails, and we have something to anchor ourselves in and to say, well, that's not good. Like the church went off the rails there. And the difficulty that if you don't have the tradition, you don't have the hierarchy, then at some point you don't even have a way to say what the good is. You can't even criticize the tradition, because where are you standing? Like on what ground are you standing to then say that those people did something people did something wrong?
I think a higher awareness has a lot to do with it. If you cultivate a sense of wisdom in people, as opposed to just keeping them in a particular program, my hope is that would be something that mixed together with this understanding that there are things above us that we have to strive to, that we in our current state are not fully, same as the God or the saints. And that balance could be good.
It's also the question of value in general. What do we value as people of faith? I mean, the criticism, specifically that Giorgiani has, I'm butchering it, but he has like kind of a weird, like Nietzschean, almost like you would say Gnostic criticism of Christianity being like, quote unquote, holding back the glorious like Promethean overman techno innovation that we could arrive to, almost like a weird form of like right-wing transhumanism in some ways. What would you say as a Christian to say, like specifically, and I have a lot of friends who are this, but like the pagan vitalists that say that, Christianity was the great like end of like the descent of the West into like quote unquote slave morality.
It's just hilarious. It's hilarious that someone thinks that, because even those great northern people that you admire, they reached their glory in the 12th century, not in the 7th century, not in the 8th century.
Except for the Germans, though, because the Germans, they used to have these ritual bathing practices, when they were nude, but afterwards they had the clothes on and they got all stinky, and they were stinky for a very long amount of time, and that's no good either. So
I'm talking about like a glorious like overflowing of energy and civilization. It's like the Germans came to Rome, they took Rome, and then they became they became the last emperors, I guess you could call them. And then the Normans came down, they became the kings of England, they became the kings of Sicily, they came down and became the kings of Russia. It's like that energy was not a pagan energy. I'm sorry to tell you. It's like before that, they were just a bunch of people drinking beer in their whatever up there. We don't know what's going on up there. It's like, I'm not saying they had nothing, but even the traditions that we have of them was written by Christians. We don't know what those northern people believed before the Christians, because they didn't write it down. And so it's like even the stories of the gods that we have are written by Christians. Yeah. And so it's like, let's not pretend that we know, like we have this idea. And so to me, it's like, it's such a idiosyncrasy to think that somehow this like pagan world that you're imagining, that you have no access to, that you're completely making up, that somehow that this pagan world was the thing that you want. Whereas in the Christian tradition, there is a room for this, like the knightly strength the vitality is there in both in the Byzantine tradition and in the Western tradition, but it is tempered to a certain extent. So you don't go like chopping heads off and raping children, and you don't do the kind of damage that and yeah, they still did despite their Christianity. But imagine without the temperance of Christ, what they would have done. Like they were still going out and
but we're not doing that
things.
today. But we're not doing that today, despite
because
all
we're
the,
still surfing. We're still surfing the Christian wave. Remember what happened the last time people wanted to go back to the neo-pagan thing? Like we came pretty close to something again. Like we came pretty close to something similar to that old world where it's like, oh, those people, they're not human. Let's just get rid of them. It's very simple.
Well, we asked because on BTR we have a lot of discussions about esoteric like various like Indo-Aryan European race theories and all that stuff, and so we had.
But I just want to say something about the vitalist thing. Okay,
go ahead.
I think it's really important to understand what Christianity offers, and which people didn't, for some reason, they can't see. It's that there's something of a lie in the vitalist position, because you're gonna get old, dude. You're gonna stop wanting to have sex all the time. You're gonna die. It's gonna happen. And so you have to integrate that into your story. It has to be part of the story. And the problem with the vitalist, let's say, mentality is that it has no room for an aspect of reality, which is the descent into weakness. Whereas what the story of Christ has is the capacity to enter into death willfully, to enter into those. You will become weak. Even if it's only for a few seconds in that last moment when you're shitting yourself on your bed, you're going to become weak. And so you need a way to integrate that. Like you need a way for it not to just be a scandal that you have to go through in order to finish like in the dump of reality. And so what Christianity offers is a way to enter into suffering deliberately and to do it even into weakness and to say, this is part of the story and I will take on my cross. I will accept to die to myself so that weakness can become something more than what it is. And so I just get annoyed sometimes when people in their 20s think that it's like, this is it. Okay, that's fine, dude.
Esoteric right-wing bodybuilders.
But you know what's coming. It's like, it's coming to you. It's going to happen. Then you can be that guy in your 50 who pretends he's still 20, but that's just embarrassing. It's embarrassing,
Jonathan,
those guys.
I completely agree. I couldn't agree more. And in fact, I would say one more thing regarding that. Well, hold on, Jay, real quick. I would say one more thing regarding that I believe that the Russians, including the priests who were commanding like the all of these horrible things to the Jews back in the day, that they were inhabiting this similar like vitalistic bloodlust tendency, which we then saw within the Nazis. The only, let's say, solution that I have here, let's say as something that could possibly change things around, would be the cultivation of wisdom that would also be, and you could say, well, they had a cultivation of wisdom back during the Byzantine era. Maybe. I'm not saying that they didn't. My only thing here, though, is that it did not seem to be enough back during that time to prevent a lot of these horrible things. I think that we should leave room for that, where maybe we can raise that.
General back then.
I agree. No, I'm not saying that. Yeah, I know.
But this is my problem with people. And by the way, we will discuss a certain bread tuber who went after you recently, Mr. Pageau.
I don't have. I've got like 10 minutes left. I gotta go. In 10 minutes. I'm sorry. So if you want to talk about that, let's do that now.
Well, you know what? You know what? Screw that guy. He's a total ghoul. I want to get your take. So. Two things. Okay. The vitalist thing. I wanted to talk to you about. It reminds me, when you're talking about suffering, it reminds me of this one passage from. It was part of the collective articles of Clement Greenberg. In my opinion, one of the only decent art critics that came out of that post-war period, along with Robert Hughes. But he had this one quote about one of my favorite painters, the Catholic mystic painter Georges Rouault. He said, like, oh, that's really just a pantomime of suffering. It's like this, like, long groveling, like it's display. It's almost like to Greenberg, like in high modernism, it's like this addressing of suffering is like almost like a hideous sort of like theatrical play. But there was something very deep and very profound about it. What is your opinion though on the nature of suffering within art? how we can arrive at sort of a resacralization through the work of art, but also what is your opinion on painters that purport to sort of re-sacralize the art object itself? For example, someone mentioned Biskinski in the chat. He's like the darker side of it. But what do you think of like visionary art, quote unquote, people like Alex Gray, people that take drugs and then paint, Robert Venosa? What do you think of these like post psychedelic people? They're incredibly skilled to the level of, like, for example, the guy who taught them all was Ernst Fuchs. He like sort of revived the Misch technique, and the level of skill to even, like, I mean, as much as people, I admit that Alex Gray can be quite repetitive, but there's still like the level of detail and skill. I mean, the guy wrote medical drafts for Harvard, right? So what is your opinion on visionary art, and how do you disagree with them? Do you think that your approach to like a spiritual art form in the modern world is different from like someone that takes DMT in the Amazon?
Yeah.
And
Well, for sure, I think it's different. I would say, let me phrase it at a very high level. It's that the question is before the technique. The question is before the object. The question is in the very reason and the very place that the object takes in the world. And so it's like, we talk about sacralization. Sacralization is not something that happens on your own. You can't just decide that something is sacred. You can't just say, well, I'm trying to re-sacralize things. That's not how it works. The sacred is something which is part of a community. It has to commune. We have to commune together. There's a whole manner in which something is recognized as being a vehicle for grace, as being a vehicle for something above you. And so it's like, in the very fact that the objects I make are for the church, already it's like, it's just a whole other world. It's like a completely different world. I don't make objects for people to put up on their wall to just look at, or to buy, or to speculate on, or to criticize, or to think about. It's like, I make objects for people to kiss and to venerate and to sprinkle holy water on and to process in the church. Like, that's a very different reality than modern art in general, like just modern art in general. And so the visionary art, it's like, I think it's fine, like whatever, like people can do what they want to do. But it's a completely different discussion, because there's something disincarnated about all of gallery art. There's something there. The entire movement of gallery art has a disincarnated aspect to it. So
they're just standalone objects that are not. Maybe they're related to the canon of art, but in terms of the way that these icons, like what you're doing, is integrated within that tradition, literally within the building. I mean, you're right. There's something dead about it. And even Heidegger said this. When it goes into a gallery, it's disconnected from its world. And
Jonathan, real quick, we got to do super chats before.
I wanted to ask you
about Marina Abramovic, but we have to do super chats.
Here we go.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah,
M donated.
Happy I avoided that one.
You have to. Well, we're gonna listen. You have.
You
to
can
come
invite me
again.
another time. I just need to go at 4:30.
Yes.
You can
no
invite me
problem.
another
Because
time.
this has been one of the best discussions we've had in
Absolutely.
a long time. So.
And I would love to have you with Uber Boyo next time if you're interested. Uber Boyo is great. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
I don't know who that is, but I'll talk to you guys again.
Yes, so here we go. M donated DKK50 through Super Chat. What is symbolism of irony? Ironic Satanism FX. Not really understanding. And okay, Nathan Woods donated $5. What were the benefits of anonymity for the artists of the past? Any good reasons for a return to more anonymous artistic ventures today?
Yeah, I would say the anonymity we invented a little bit today. The works were never completely anonymous, but they were also not focusing on the artist. And so it was more like the artist was making it's similar to, like, why would you write your name on a chair if you make a chair? Like, I mean, it's not anonymous. Like, if you ask who made the chair, people will know, but like, why would you write your name on a chair? The purpose for people to sit on it. And so, like, why would you write your name on your piece of art? Like, the purpose of the art is for it to be an image of Jesus or an image of Mary. And so it's all about, like, what the center is. And so, like, Michelangelo chipping his name, into the Madonna, it's like, that's a whole change, which is this, it's about the artist and about the artist's ego and the artist. So I would say that you don't need the work to be anonymous, but I would say there's a let's say a receding of the artist, I think would be helpful. And so I don't sign my works of art. Like sometimes like there are a few things that I'll sign, like a print, for example. If people order prints from me once a year, I'll sign it. It's not a big deal, but most of my art doesn't have my name on it because that's not the point.
Wow.
Excellent.
I feel embarrassed. I sign everything of holy crap.
All right, M donated DKK $50. Are Lucifer really that wrong when you think about it? All right, we're not going to go on that right now.
That's too long of a discussion.
Alex Basham, $20 through Super Chat. Woo!
Wow,
Love your work, Jonathan, plus your brother's book. Thanks for coming on BTR. Return guest maybe? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Sure. I mean, it was fun discussion. Yeah, my brother wrote a book called The Language of Creation, which is really kind of a distillation of symbolism of Genesis and the rest of the Bible. It's amazing. It's like it's the best book on symbolism out there, really.
Wow.
Excellent.
Lev, if you could find it and link it. I think I may have heard of that. I've come across
Well,
it.
I'm gonna link it, but the Super Chat is not available right now. No, I mean the chat. I'm using a different window for the chat.
Yeah,
I've noticed the one that you're seeing has frozen, but I am going to link to everything. What did you say the title of the book was?
It's called The Language of Creation, Symbolism
Language
in Genesis.
of Creation.
Yeah.
I'm going to put it in the chat, and guys, please buy this book. And what is your brother's name?
It's Mathieu Pageau, so like Matthew, but in French. You can just write Pageau, Language of Creation. It'll show. There won't be two.
And so
here we go. Amazon link.
What is the best way to find you besides Twitter and YouTube? How can people purchase your work, for instance? Just your website?
Yeah, right now I'm not. It's not like you can buy. I'm selling prints now because I have a 2-year waiting list for my icons, and so it's like that's kind of stopped for now. I actually stopped taking commissions because I need to figure some stuff out. But like people can buy prints on Fine Art America. I have a page there where some of my prints are available. But for icons, for sure, for now at least, if people like on Patreon, people can donate a certain amount, and I'm working with my assistant to create ornamental carvings to improve icon carving, let's say. And so those come available like once a few times a year. But you can find, like in terms of symbolism, you can find my work on the Symbolic World. Then that's where kind of everything gets concentrated. And for my carving, it's pageaucarvings.com.
And do you take on students regularly, or?
I'm doing like I used to do these week-long workshop type things, but now with COVID I didn't. So I have a online carving class that people can take. I tried to make it very reasonable. It's like 30 hours really of like I take you through every single detail.
Wow.
And so if it's on Thinkific, I think Jonathan Pageau Thinkific, if you're interested in that, to learn to carve icons in wood. Yeah, I've heard good stuff about it because I really take everybody, even beginners can take this class. So
how do you say that word? Thinkific?
It's called Thinkific, I think, the website. Like I don't even know the website I'm using here.
Here we go. I found it. I am looking at in the chat right now for all of you wonderful people who have subscribed and who have contributed to take a look at. Jonathan, you are wonderful. I think this is one of my favorite chats we've had.
We have to do this again.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. It was fun. I really enjoyed it. So all the best to everybody. And
thank you so much, John.
All right. See you soon.
God bless.
See you soon. And we're not going to be done yet. Now we're going to shill our Patreon. So patreon.com/breaktherules. I am shilling it, but I want to figure out a way to do it properly here with this window because for some reason Restream just... it says server network timeout. But either way...
You mean Restream to where?
Restream to, I don't know, the chat does not seem to work. I'm trying to log in here and nothing's happening. Oh, hold on, mountains or hills? It's giving me the opinion of mountains or hills. Let me see, that's a bad one. I'm going to do another one. Crosswalks, that's easy. Here we go. See, the reason why I have to do this, ladies and gentlemen, is because I'm using, here we go, it's finally working now. Here we go. So I am finally going to close this window up. We have the chat going, but I don't think it's synced up. Everybody subscribe, by the way. All the 90 people who are watching this right now, why the heavens have you not subscribed to Break the Rules yet? If you have not checking out our channel yet, you must.
Yeah, it's too bad. I wanted to talk to him a bit about how people in the contemporary art world are trying to like LARP some form of ritual. Abramovic comes to mind, obviously. Also, I mean, Matthew Barney is another example of someone who has a weird sort of like mythology without a mythology. It's very surreal. It's very abstract. His Cremester cycle videos, but also just in general how There's a certain someone, I'm not going to name him because he's honestly not worth anyone's time. This breadtuber that went after Jonathan's video on the Little Nos, and Jonathan was saying some stuff that we had a stream where we talk about the Little Nos music video. And apparently Jonathan Pageau is a fascist and hates people and
wait, how could he be a
all
fascist?
these fedora tipper talking points.
How could it be a fascist if his surname is Pageau?
Yeah, well,
Get it, Pageau.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah, so there
I
we
mean
go.
something different French, but no, I think like how it's really funny. Just the time that changed between, I would say, the early YouTube new atheist people and nowadays, how these sort of reintroducing these new atheist talking points to go after Jonathan Pageau, and it's really, it only works for that audience, but in general it seems that people are fed up now finally with that form of like just baby brain anti-religious discourse. And it's really fascinating to see bread tubers recapitulate to their atheist fedora tipping roots to go after people like Jonathan and Jordan Peterson. And I have my own criticisms of Jordan Peterson, but I find it hilarious how this certain person was just doing all of this thing. Like there's this one moment where he's like, oh, sorry, not he. I don't want to misgender him, because apparently if you're a straight white male in BreadTube, you have to find some exotic thing like being non-binary or something. But this person said like, they weren't real witches, right? Like they weren't actual witches. It's such a stupid like baby brain fedora tipping type of stuff. It's really like I think like what Jonathan and what others are doing, I mean, to confront the reality that even through, and again, this is like what the super chat was saying about irony and Satanism, even through the act of like ironic, like LaVey Satanism, I mean, that's sort of like a kitschy pastiche of the 80s era. But even nowadays, this sort of like ironic, like TikTok witch, Zoomer, Satanism stuff, or like all of this like adopting a cult, like giving like a woke political inversion to like obscure African tribal beliefs, which some BLM people were doing. It's like, to me, that's just shows that the era of like hardcore rationalist materialism and fedora tipping is over. Re-enchantment in a postmodern sense is here to stay. And whether we're going to go back to the faith that delivers us to a sort of, well, a union is a bad word, but sort of a capitulation, a instantiation of the light of God, a hypostasing of the light of the Lord, or whether we're going to go to very like politically mediated forms of mysticism that really is just Gnostic at the end of the day. I mean, this particular BreadTube is big into the trans issue, and really we all know that the way that they describe their own identity is just like some form of like bastardized political secular Gnosticism. It's really hilarious how even the fedora tippers themselves can't help themselves from going towards some like weird, crazy. It's like Eric Vogelin, he was right. It's all just Gnosticism at the end of the day. It's hilarious. It's trying to break through to the real self. And Jonathan Pageau is an evil fascist because he doesn't want to let people break through to the real self. It's like, it's hilarious. It's ridiculous.
But I never understood why they would consider that to be Gnosticism, where it's not like they're getting
they don't realize
wisdom.
But it is. I mean, no, their deeper wisdom is entirely corporeal. It's entirely just a expression of their own hedonistic identity and sense of self that has to be
how is that Gnosticism?
Crushed by the weight of politics.
But then how is that Gnosticism?
Well, it's a secularized version of it, because you believe that the true self can only come about through a great eminentizing of the eschaton, which was what Vogelin said. So the eschaton is like, glorious automated luxury transcommunism or whatever, and it's like through that we can arrive at a quote unquote equal just society if we get rid of if we glass all of the fundies like Jonathan Pageau and myself, and we deliver ourselves to this glorious future where I don't want to say no more before YouTube bans us. But
well,
anyways,
Gio,
let's do the shout out.
you put the fun in fundies, just so you know.
Yeah, even that term fundy, I mean, to say the term fundy unironically in the year of our Lord 2021 is like, what are you doing? Like, if you go to YouTube, go to those old atheist YouTubers, go to Fake Sagan, go to Coughlin666, go to even the fucking amazing atheist. Like, go to them. It's like literally watching a time capsule, and it's hilarious. It's amazing. But anyways,
by the way, shout out to Glow in the Dark, because he has the avatar of Alexander Pushkin.
Oh,
very nice. I think it was Pushkin's birthday a couple of days ago, actually. So
TikTok witch LARPing, yeah. Vitalist versus Christian trads is the reverse debate. Oh, we tried to have Christianity versus paganism. That didn't go over too well.
Please don't remind me of that.
The first half of the debate was good. Young talked about, Buff says Young talked about people in his day becoming Hindu or astronomers out of exoticism. It's very true. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of perennialists, like they embraced Sufism. They embraced like weird forms of Vedanta, which were more intellectualized than anything else. But I think that desire isn't inherently bad. I just think that you have to reconcile the traditions of your own people in order to do that. But anyways, yeah, we have to go because I think if we go on too long, we're sort of robbing people, because it is a sowing discourse. And Pageau had to leave earlier. So take us away with the shilling, Lev.
All right, well, speaking of fundies, the only fundie that I care about and respect is the fundie who funds Break the Rules. And how do you fund Break the Rules? Number one, by sending those beautiful super chats, which I appreciate, of course, and also by becoming a patron. Here is Definitely Legit. For those who do not know what Definitely Legit is, it is a beautiful collie dog. Look at the design on this beautiful collie dog over here, and this can be yours for $20 when you become a patron of Break the Rules.
Yeah, Love's father carves them by hand.
Yeah, so speaking of carving...
tier.
Yeah.
Well, he has other designs too, but this is we're running, Definitely Legit is a friend of ours on Twitter who's been on BTR quite a bit, and that is his avatar.
Yeah, and you've probably seen the collie dog popping up on the screen whenever we get a new subscriber. That is Definitely Legit, and this is Definitely Legit made of wood. So for $5 patrons, you are going to get access to our Discord, not like the secret parts of the Discord. You could still get access to the regular Discord, and you get access to special episodes, Patreon only. Gio, the last one we did, we were talking about Berserk, and you're reading Berserk still, right? How do you like it?
It's pretty good. I'm almost to the part where something happens, something Casca, something Griffith. I'm not gonna. It's terrible.
Yes.
But our next exclusive Patreon only episode, we're gonna have a fun one. We're gonna talk about well, actually, no. I think we're going to talk about the buck breaking thing soon, and maybe
no. We're going to talk about the bug breaking on the left stream, art stream. So that is going to be Sunday at 2:00. Guys, real quick, because I do not show my own YouTube channel enough, what I'm going to do is I'm going to post my YouTube channel here as well.
And we've just had another super chat. Ivan Bowithin, $20.
Oh my God, Ivan!
Thank you. Wow,
Ivan. Gio, do you know who Ivan is? Ivan is one of the great animators who worked with me on Only Love and Fantastic Plastic.
That's good.
He is an OG. I've known Ivan for years and years and years, and I am incredibly grateful for that, brother. And I hope to work with you real soon. I want to get right back into animation as soon as Break the Rules kicks off.
The one thing that does piss me off, Lev, is that the YouTube super chats, they put this humans of flat design with the heart emoji. Oh my God, terrible.
I know.
YouTube is infested with humans of flat design.
Yeah, what are you gonna do?
Oh, by the way, humans of flat design, that is something that we could talk about next time with Jonathan Pageau. We had this excellent stream a while back with my good friend Eli Schiff, the humans of flat. If you look up BTR, Break the Rules, humans of flat design, it is one of the, again, every time we talk about art in the modern world, I truly think that it's some of the best content we've ever done. I mean, besides the drama and all the bullshit, but like,
Well, here it is. Here's the link to that stream. I got to go back and forth between chat and the screen here. But
so
Eli
at the $20,
Chef,
you'll get the magnet, and it repeats every year. So Lev's father will make new ones that you could get yearly if you keep up your Patreon. At $30, you will get a print by me from either one of 5 from the That Feel One No GF woodblock printmaking print series. I will send you a good one. But keep in mind, all of them are different, and that's what I love about block printing. That's what I love about printmaking in general, is that each one looks different. So you will get, even though the design is the same, it is a totally unique work of art, in my opinion. And I'll send you a good one. Maybe I'll send you 2 because some of them are small. And at the $50 tier, the mega luxury real patrician tier, you will get all of that. You will also get a unique custom magnet made by Lev's father. So any design that you want, he'll try to make a version of it, as long as it's like appropriate, not something stupid.
Yeah, because I know what they're thinking. I know exactly what they want.
You'll get a dick or something like that. I mean, maybe if you want, I don't know. You will also get a printout. Actually, you know what? We could probably extend this to any other tier.
Wait, I have an idea. Gio, I have an idea. It's going to be a dick, but like it's going to be layers of a dick. So the way that my father makes his nutcrackers is he makes them in like these wooden plank layers, which then he combines together. So the reason big is that you have to remain the patron for 5 years, and each time you're gonna get another layer of the dick until it becomes a 3-dimensional penis.
Anyways, at $50 tier, you will get all of the above. You will get a printout of any BTR banner image that you want as a poster. So Lev's father animates a lot of them. Lev animates a lot of them. But I think even at the $20 or $30 tier, we can work something out if you want a specific poster. We're going to do some kind of Redbubble thing where you can get merchandise, hopefully. You can even get t-shirts with something on it, with at least the logo. But also, if you want to buy a custom poster print, we can work something out. We have to figure it out. But you will also get another painting by me, which is a Bob Ross painting style, but in acrylic. Right. And you will also get a Warhammer 40K figure painted by the lovely Jules Hamilton. And you'll get a custom magnet, a magnet from the $20, a print, maybe even 2 prints from me, a painting by me, and the Warhammer 40K figure. And you will also get access to everything, our undying loyalty at the $50 tier. But so that is the BTR shilling. And this is one of my most favorite. I was literally crying at the end of the episode. This is how important it was to me. With Alexander Bard, Logo.Atlas, Joel Davis, our good friend, John Pellich, and of course, the great Paul Town. This is one of my favorite episodes.
And the reason why I bring this up is that...
And by the way, I have something special in regards to that episode. That night, I worked hard. I made a dry point etching. I'm going to reveal it next week on BTR. But you could possibly buy that as well as a Patreon tier.
Well, and Gio, you were talking about having a t-shirt with a logo. Well, you could have a t-shirt of logo as the logo. You understand what I'm talking
imagine like some guy on Lit on 4chan buying a Logo.Atlas t-shirt, being like, I read Ampersand, I read Selfie Suicide, I love Logo, I love his meta epic contrarianism. Imagine that. We could have a t-shirt of Logo, and it's totally not, I mean, maybe there's going to be some copyright issue. I don't know. But anyways, this has been amazing. Thank you all for joining us. We have to get Jonathan on because truly there was such a lot of stuff I wanted to talk about, but he had to go. This has been great. But Lev, before we go, what is next week on BTR besides the art stream?
Oh man.
So on Sunday on Lev's personal channel, we're going to talk about buck breaking.
Yes, we are.
It's going to be amazing.
Okay, so here is what we have coming up. Just give me a little bit of time here. I just have to go into
and by the way, Z-Man, yes, the real Paul Town was on BTR. And I was also on his podcast, Birdie and Paul Town. If you look it up, it was a great episode. I believe Versaloon also recently went on his podcast, a good friend of ours. But what is next?
So here's what's happening.
BTR?
Okay, well, first of all, Sunday, June 13th, that's going to be the Left stream. Everybody subscribe to my YouTube channel.
Is today Juneteenth, Lev? Or is that the 19th?
I don't know. I mean, today's the 10th, so it wouldn't be inth in terms
No,
of
it's the 19th. Yeah, we're gonna have a special Juneteenth stream that hopefully won't get us banned off of YouTube.
And Hotep Sophia is coming. Hotep Sophia is coming on Sunday.
Yeah, so we're gonna talk about
safety propaganda. And safety propaganda.
Yeah, my good friend Adam Lair, who is amazing next level art critic. Maybe if Pageau comes again, we're gonna have him on with Adam or Paul Talk.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see what happens.
And the two Pauls. And over here we have Tuesday, June 15th. It's going to be black.compilled, 6 o'clock. So
from the Fed Post podcast.
Yes, exactly. He's coming in. And okay, Thursday, June 17th, it's going to be another one of those argue my positions. I want it to be about like welfare or what do you call it? Like that the thing that Yang wants to do, the UBI, and I wanna get some of our friends in there, so I want to see who can do that. And then we're gonna have Bog Beef coming in Tuesday, June 22. We are gonna have Tara Szpanki. I sent you her stuff, Gio. Do you remember?
I didn't see that. Did you?
So she's the Polish. Yes.
No, you didn't. You have to send it. Yeah.
Okay, I'll send it again.
Ivan Popov, Geo Bring Borzin reads book culture. Well, I would ideally I would want to bring on Borzy, but I don't know if he wants to. I don't know if he's still doing his show, The Third Rail, because he recently some very evil ghoul doxed him recently. But maybe if someone can DM me on Twitter for a way. I mean, I get Dogbot's friends with him, so maybe we could reach out to Dogbot to contact him if he wants to come on. Juneteenth oh my God, a Juneteenth magnet. Maybe a buck breaking magnet. We could have that.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
All right,
I could make a print. I could be like Kara Walker and have a woodblock print of a buck breaking. Maybe. No, I'm not gonna do that.
All right. Stupid. So next we have the following person. Let's see. I just want to make sure that the chat. Okay, we are gonna have. Let's see. We are going to have a Stone Age Herbalist for the art stream Sunday, June 27th. So that's on my channel. And then we're going to have Tuesday,
nice. He's a good follower.
Yes, and then we're going to have Styx, Hex, and Hammer 666 coming in Tuesday, June 29th. We should bring Pageau in for that one. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That would be a lot of fun. So, and then we're going to have, I believe, Tuesday, July 6th, we're going to have Default Friend, Sewing Discourse with Default Friend.
Oh, nice.
We are going to have Thursday,
who's also a good friend of mine.
Yes. We're going to have Thursday, July 8th, Uncle Doomer coming in.
Oh.
And, yes, and a couple of people here that are still like, we got to see. And then Thursday, July 22, I Hypocrite. We're going to have him on.
And we are going to work on getting Amy Therese soon, so I could creepily hit on her at every single turn. No, I'm kidding. We're going to, so Lev, if we have some dates between now and Jason Giorgiani in August,
yes.
Well, I do want to get Amy Therese for a Sewing Discourse.
I think that is definitely doable. And over here, and Glow in the Dark
Brando. Well, I mean, Apocalypse Now is one of my favorite Brando performances.
Well, no, Gio Brando is actually a reference to JoJo, which you have not
well, it's on
yet,
Tubi, so I can watch JoJo's Bizarre Adventures.
There we go. And also, what do you think of bring Kantbot on?
Okay, I mean, listen. As much as I can't be too bitter of a person, if he truly did want to come on, I wouldn't be opposed to it. But he's never gonna. He'll never come on. But
well, just like Lindy Man, or do you think Lindy Man can come on?
Lindy Man will never come on BTR, not because he hates us, but because he's very sketchy with doing interviews in general. I think because he thinks that doing interviews or podcasts will cut into his thing. But I mean, I would love to have Paul Scalis on. I think as two Med Bulls, we could really hash it out.
Well, maybe if we bring Nassim Taleb on, maybe that's gonna bring Lindy Man on.
I guarantee we probably have a better chance of bringing Taleb on than we do Paul Scalis.
I want to use him as bait.
Yeah. Styx did a stream with Jay Dyer in the past. Oh, I think I saw a little bit. I mean, people have suggested Jay Dyer. Jay Dyer, I mean, as a Catholic, he can be quite vicious, but I would love to have Jay Dyer on. I think, like, even if we have disagreements, I think Jay Dyer would be a great guest if we had a reverse debate. But something about
Heavens, yeah.
esoteric Hollywood. But of course, we would have to find a Hollywood cheese pizza person to reverse debate I don't know. I mean, we would have to find some real terrible ghoul.
I'll check the Rolodex, Gio.
Yeah.
What can I say?
Well,
okay.
because of the stuff that Jay Dyer talks about, we'd have to get some pretty evil person to like reverse debate Jay Dyer on stuff. But yeah, I'd love to have Jay Dyer.
Also, I hope
discourse. It would be
I
great.
hope we can get Ayala Girl back on for a street.
Ayala Girl versus Jay Dyer.
Well, no, Ayala Girl versus Brittany Venti. I think that would be an interesting one.
Oh my god, that would be amazing. Ayala Girl versus Alex Kashuda. That would be. Yeah.
There we go. So, fellas, listen. This is a wonderful stream. We're going to go now. Please subscribe. Please follow us. And also follow me on Twitter. I got to show my Twitter. I feel like this is the responsible thing for me to do. Twitter.com/LevPo. LEVPO. For all the people who are just listening to this on
Jay
audio.
versus Love on Russia. Oh, that would be amazing.
Oh my God. That would be a lot of fun.
We have to try to find a way to get Alexander Dugan on to debate.
Oh my God.
Russia.
Gio, you got... Okay. Next, okay, here we go. This is what this is my Twitter over here. Follow me on Twitter. Here it is.
LevPo at twitter.com.
Yes, exactly.
Matthew, get Ayala the hella out of here. Ayala, Ella, hell. Oh, I hate that stupid song. That was, ugh. But yeah, get it. Ella. Oh my God. Well, we're gonna talk about Ayala with Default Friend. So, and by the way, her podcast After the Orgy, her and Personality Girl, they've released a good episode. I'm catching up with all of them. I watched this one they did about teenage love, which I thought was quite fascinating. They were critiquing this book and this movie. I generally, even though it's a podcast for women, I truly do believe that men should watch or rather listen to the After the Orgy podcast with Default Friend and Personality Girl. I think it gives a great perspective on things from a femcel perspective. So I can't. No, they're not femcels. I mean, it's a great podcast. I'm not simping. They're both taken. I'm not simping. Please. So yeah.
All right, guys. This is the end of the stream. Let me put on the chat for one last time here.
Buff, imagine the hysteria. Oh my! Imagine the hysteria. Oh God.
I used to like that show, by the way, back in the day, Hysteria, which was his WB show. Yeah, you remember.
But they're referring to the women hysteria thing.
I know.
Yeah.
All right, guys, this is
thank you.
This is the end. Thank you guys so much for watching. Mwah.
God
Subscribe
bless.
and good night, everybody. And God bless.